Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I mean that. I'm so bad at housework, as you know, reminding you of things and setting up parts of the programme in a professional fashion. But I do mean that. I completely appreciate how frustrating it can be to be persuaded of various things, particularly with regard to policing in your hometown. In this case, with the Mayor of London, we're talking about London. But because we usually just put questions to Sadiq Khan, I kind of want to, next time he's here, do, is it true that? And then the things that we all hear and see on radio phone-ins or on social media or elsewhere, he can actually then tell us what bits of it are true, what bits of it are not true, whether it's all true, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking most obviously of, claims that you could have more police officers if you didn't have pride, or you didn't remove those adverts from the London Underground that essentially told women that unless they looked like a supermodel, they had no business going to the beach. Just off the top of my head, but do put that in your little book, send a memo to yourself, because I'll forget. You know I will. It's the way it always works. And then next time he's here, we can just do things ever so slightly differently, perhaps. 10:45 is the time. I am going to be joined by Theo Usherwood just to have another look at that story about the Electoral Commission and the Metropolitan Police, apparently at loggerheads over an investigation into Vote Leave and Leave EU. I think there's a lot of rocks there that still haven't been turned over, but then, like everybody else, I'm always in slight danger of seeing what you want to see. It is Thursday, so come 12 o'clock, Mystery Hour will be upon us. And before that, there are two issues that I am talking with you about now. One of which, oddly, follows almost like night follows day on from the conversation that we had yesterday. And I am, I'm afraid, going to indulge myself even further on my pet peeve when it comes to conservationism and such like. We learned yesterday, or at least I did, you probably were aware of it already, that in the context of big game hunting, trophy hunting, the Daily Mirror had a brilliant exclusive about a British trophy hunter based in South Africa. We learned that there is a very big market for wild animals being, well, they're not wild, traditionally wild animals being bred essentially in captivity for a hunting market. So every time we see a picture of Donald Trump's children, for example, with a dead leopard draped over their shoulder, we don't know whether or not that is a leopard that would have died of natural causes soon anyway, whether that's a leopard that wouldn't even have existed if it wasn't for the hunting industry that's taken hold and generates huge amounts of money in Africa. But here's my thing, okay? Jeremy Hunt, of course, has today said that if he is Prime Minister, he'll have a free vote in the House of Commons on fox hunting. That breaks down roughly as if Conservatives have a decent majority, it will go through. It's not a completely party political position, that. But personally, and don't hate me for this, personally, I felt it was a little bit class war flavoured when Tony Blair brought in the ban. It did seem to me to be a way of sticking it to the posh and the privileged, which appeals often to the Labour base, especially sometimes to the posh and privileged parts of the Labour base, but sticking it to other posh and privileged people in a way that didn't really have any big economic or social impact. But if you're in favour of fox hunting, and you are one of those, and this reaches right up to the royal family, of course, one of those people who waxes lyrical about the evils of trophy hunting, I don't think you've got a moral leg to stand on. I really don't. And I don't also believe that everyone who's opposed to fox hunting is opposed to fox hunting because of the foxes. I genuinely do think a lot of people opposed to fox hunting are opposed to fox hunting because of the fox hunters, because of the perception that they are sort of braying toffs, blasting their bugles as they gallop through the countryside, riding roughshod over Farmer Giles's crops. Farmer Giles is usually on the side of the fox hunts, of course. The key question here, but there are two, actually, and we'll look at both of them. The first is what it makes you think of Jeremy Hunt. This incredibly lazy, I would argue, utterly unnecessary attempt to appeal emotionally to a sort of rump of the Conservative membership that do kind of... And the oddest thing about them is the fact that the massive majority of the 160,000 Conservative Party members not only won't be associated with fox hunting, I'm going full speculation now. You're more than welcome to pull this to shreds. But they'll actually be the kind of people that your average aristocrat or fox hunter does look down on. This is the weirdest thing about British politics, isn't it? The thing I describe as the cap-doffing, forelock-tugging tendency. So here is someone that... You're right there, Theo. Sorry. What are you doing? You're cracking and creaking. It's unbelievable. My apologies to anybody who's listening. Pleasure has just been completely polluted by Theo Usherwood's shenanigans. We'll be with him imminently. The false only question, which we'll crack on with after 11, so book your place on the board now, 0345 6060 973. How do you respond to my accusation that you don't actually care about the foxes? This is all about sticking it to the toffs. No value judgment involved. I'm not even suggesting for a minute there's anything wrong with wanting to stick it to the toffs, but you don't really care about the foxes. 0345 6060 973. But the bit I want to get to the heart of is who exactly is Jeremy Hunt appealing to here? The fox hunting fraternity isn't going to make a meaningful difference to the leadership election. It's people who... I'm trying to be mildly polite, not excessively polite. I want to be mildly polite and mildly rude. Jeremy Hunt is appealing to the sort of people that turn up in their anoraks to watch the fox hunters and sort of stand there thinking, oh, well... this isn't for the likes of us. I know my place, but well done, sir. Up with the gentry. I don't know. Maybe I'm going mad, but there's something quite Victorian about Jeremy Hunt's appeal to fox hunting in the context of a Conservative leadership campaign. If you've understood any of that, I'd love to know your thoughts on the usual number, 0345 6060 973. But as promised, Theo Usherwood is here to talk us through this story, which, I find myself every day thinking that would be getting more mileage if so much of the media hadn't nailed its colours to the Brexit mast. This would be reported objectively as proper news, but it's certainly interesting.
Let's start with the transcript of the interview with Christopher Hope, the Telegraph journalist, because there are 2 points I want to bring out, pull out for you, so then we can see what's going on. Perhaps Christopher Hope asks, "Where do you stand on fox hunting? Will you legalise it?" To which Jeremy Hunt replies, "I would, as soon as there was a majority of Parliament that would be likely to repeal the fox hunting ban, then I would support a vote in Parliament." And how would you vote personally in the vote? I would vote to repeal the ban. Then the question goes on as to whether it will be in the manifesto. So he's asked, will it be in the next manifesto of the other party if you were Prime Minister? To have a vote in Parliament, yes. Now Jeremy Hunt has done a reverse ferret because he's realised that he's putting off many of his own supporters and said that it would have to be a free vote and that there will never be a majority if there is a free vote rather than a whipped vote.
So it's a meaningless sop then to a certain...
Well, he's now saying it's a meaningless sop. It wouldn't be a meaningless sop if he'd stuck with his original
because he didn't know that 83 Conservative MPs had in the last Parliament committed to opposing any repeal of the Hunting Act.
Well, he's also received a backlash because it went so badly for Theresa May in 2017 when she sat down with her advisers one morning and said, they gamed what would happen if they were asked about fox hunting, and she said, well, actually, I think it'd be okay, and then turned up at an event with journalists who was asked the question, then said she would support repealing the ban, and it went down very, very badly, especially with voters in cities.
It's a fascinating issue. I'm allergic to radio phone-in topics that are based on the question of do you care about this topic? But I really want to ask people whether they actually care about this topic. It's when I'm older than you, and I was a schoolboy debater. Fox hunting was one of the absolute hardy perennials of the genre, and then it sort of went away. How do we gauge the depth of feeling on this?
It's come back because there is, and we saw it yesterday with Boris Johnson's pledge to overturn sin taxes, is that there is a juxtaposition between the selectorate that these two are appealing to right now, the Conservative Party membership of 160,000. You could describe this as...
but most of them aren't going to be fox hunters, are they?
No, but it is seen as a Tory totem
yes.
poll, and that's why he's talking about it, and that's why he said what he said, rather than saying the answer if you were to the general election in front of the country, and you're looking at the polling, would be to turn around and say, well, actually, I think this issue has been done and dusted. We had the fox hunting was repealed was banned back in 2005. I'm not going to go near it. It's finished.
So it's a competence question then that hangs over Jeremy Hunt.
Well, he's also got form, of course, because he said earlier on in this campaign that he'd vote to reduce. Well, he thought that the abortion limit should be reduced from 24 weeks to 12 weeks, and said that was his personal view, but he wouldn't, just because it was his personal view, he wouldn't actually do it. So he's trying to create a picture about who he is as a person.
You think it's conscious and deliberate then, even though this morning he looks a little bit silly?
He needs
a brand.
Yes, but he needs to be more. He needs to be more than what is Boris Johnson in the eyes of the Conservative membership, and therefore he needs to go further. He has more to prove.
Yes. The abortion thing is, I mean, I personally wish it had never returned to the news agenda, but he's not alone in hypocrisy on this. Of course, Jacob Rees-Mogg thinks that children who are raped by their own family members should go through with their pregnancies, but he's supporting Boris Johnson's leadership campaign.
Yes. So the problem that Jeremy Hunt has is that Boris Johnson, from the start of the campaign, has been out in front in terms of the Conservative membership, and he needs to. It's a bit like being in a school playground. He needs to be able to prove to the other children in the school playground that he is the bigger bully. He is the biggest in town. He can
That's
represent
a nice way
their
of putting
interests.
it. He needs to persuade the membership that he will bang heads together and upset the usual suspects, whoever the usual suspects may be. The problem is, of course, they don't really know. They just use these slightly fatuous terms like lefty, and they presume that everyone. But it turns out a lot of right-wing people don't like fox hunting either.
And the other problem is that when it comes to a general election, the children in other playgrounds in other parts of the country are going to get to vote too.
Yes, of course.
Not just in the Tory membership playground.
The Electoral Commission and the Metropolitan Police, are you across that story, or do you want to go away and do a bit of digging?
Can I go away and do a bit of digging?
Yes, of course you can. And we'll see you shortly before 12 o'clock, will you? Because I want to find out a little bit more about that. Course. Thank you very much indeed. Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, as you've just heard, joining us again shortly. The time now is 10:56. Fox hunting story. Well, someone's shot Jeremy Hunt's fox, actually. It's probably the best way of putting it. The other political intervention today that intrigues me, and I suspect will intrigue you, and I think it's always trying to second-guess what you're going to get most engaged in. I suspect this is probably going to be a better use of our time than talking about fox hunting. Theresa May will, in a speech in Scotland today, will warn her putative successors, the two men competing to be her successor, about the prospect of the union breaking up, about the prospect of a no-deal Brexit causing an acceleration of the country breaking up. I think Farage is inevitably something else that was incredibly easy to predict. The man who keeps banging on about we want our country back, now claiming that meant our country will split up all along. So, you know, it'd be a full-time job pointing out the hypocrisy and the dishonesty of that man. I've only got 3 hours a day. Can't come close. But we want our country back. You mean our country? No. I mean bits of it. Oh, but Brexit, losing Scotland would be a price worth paying for getting our country back? So whose country are you talking about? Anyway, 10:57 is the time. This is the speech that she's going to do. I think she's right, for the record, but it also occurs to me as I use that phrase, our country, she's going to tell the next leader, whoever it may be, that they must strengthen the union. She'll speak in Scotland later today and urge her successor to think creatively about how to ensure the UK stays together. I throw my phone lines open now to my Scottish listeners because I fell into a trap yesterday of using the word we. I've had such a crash course in Scottish sensibilities since Brexit, because it must be so galling to turn on a national radio station like this and hear me talking about something as relatively trivial as the football yesterday and saying we, in the context of England, not in the context of men and women. I made that mistake as well. God, I cover myself in glory. And you've got your radio on and you're kind enough to enjoy the programme and you send me generally nice messages, but then I sit here and say we, when I'm referring very specifically to England. I'm not referring to Wales or Northern Ireland or Scotland, and I've done it a lot. And if somebody like me does it, who feels very keenly and indeed, to use that slightly complicated word, I feel very patriotic about the four nations. So, well, certainly the three nations. I feel very patriotic about England, Scotland and Wales. It's weird to contemplate the prospect of them breaking up, but I can't sit here now in 2019 and say what I would have said in 2014, which is I think it would be a terrible mistake of the Scottish people to go their own way, because I've seen how you feel Westminster treats you. I've seen how you feel the English media treats you. I've been guilty of some of these offences myself. But if we crack on with a no-deal Brexit, which is almost inevitable, I think, because unless the withdrawal agreement, as it pretty much is now, gets through the House of Commons, we're going to come out with no deal at the end of October. Scotland never wanted to do that. Northern Ireland never wanted to do that. According to the polling, England and Wales don't want to do it either. But in the context of the vote that happened, Scottish independence is inevitable, isn't it? And it's not unprecedented, but it is, I think, significant that Theresa May, in the sort of closing stages of her premiership, is warning, essentially, whoever her successor may be, about the threat to the union of unfolding political developments in the United Kingdom. She will urge her successor to think creatively about how to ensure the UK stays together. Isn't that incredible to reflect that in 3 years we've gone from people mewling and whining about wanting our country back without being able to provide any evidence at all that our country was in the grip of anyone except us. And now we're actually looking at the possible breakup of our kingdom. We want our country back. What, all of it? No, just bits of it. What? And it's got to be significant that Theresa May, who obviously in the context of competence has been an unrivaled disaster as Prime Minister, but it doesn't mean you ignore everything she does. This must mean that she is concerned, as I think most people are, who value the union. And of course, this is one of those conversations where I don't really struggle to be balanced. I don't want Scotland to leave the United Kingdom. I don't want the United Kingdom to leave the European Union. I believe in unions. I believe in unity. I believe in harmony and cooperation and friendship. And I understand why Scottish nationalism is on the march. And I find it very hard not to sympathise with it. Because, you know, I'm a Londoner. London is the engine room of the United Kingdom. Financially, it is, I mean, crikey, it does so much of the heavy lifting. And yet, increasingly, as I look across the vista of my country, I see people being encouraged to malign and attack London. It's like literally sitting in the back of the car, slagging off the engine as you toot. And I'm not being rude. I grew up in Kidderminster. I've not got a sort of metropolitanitis. But these constant divisions, these people who are constantly, every time the target that they chose last time turns out not to be a target at all, they move on to something else. So Brussels has not exercised control over our money, our borders or our laws, but rather than admit to themselves that they've been mugged by people who said that it did, they're now listening to the same people turn their attack on London. Or claim that a breakup of the United Kingdom would be somehow desirable or a price worth paying for Brexit. It's weird, of course, because it puts English nationalists, who are generally a slightly ridiculous bunch, in the same bed as Scottish nationalists, who are increasingly a rather sensible-sounding bunch. But I don't want to confine the comment, actually glancing at the switchboard, I'm already not going to, but let me stress that this is not just about Scottish people or people in Scotland. I don't have any say at all in this process, in the breakup of my country. If, as Nicola Sturgeon is now claiming, that another referendum within 2 years is looking increasingly likely, if, as Theresa May's intervention today attests, sensible Conservatives are worried about this prospect, she is urging her successor to think creatively about how to ensure the UK stays together. Who thought, honestly, in 2016, when they cast their vote, that they were voting for a scenario in which a Prime Minister is worried about the United Kingdom breaking up? I don't think anybody did. I really don't. The more you understood, and I apologise for not having my head around this prior to the referendum result and my ludicrous decision to try and observe BBC-style balance in my LBC broadcasting in the run-up to that referendum, will haunt me for the rest of my days. But nobody voted to break up the United Kingdom, and now they're telling you that you did. Just like they're telling you that you voted to lose your job, and you voted to be poorer, and you voted to have fewer freedoms, and you voted to have less money, less opportunity. You voted to have fewer nurses in the NHS. You voted to have crops rotting in the fields. You knew that you voted for the collapse of the car industry, the destruction of agriculture. You voted not to save the British fishing industry, which is what you pretended you were voting for and told me you were voting for. What you actually voted for was to create an economic scenario in which the British fishing industry would need billions of pounds worth of bailout from central government. And now they're telling me, or now rather they're telling you, that you voted to break up the United Kingdom. That is a price worth paying for your Brexit unicorn, which you can't even describe anymore because it bears no resemblance whatsoever to the unicorn you swore blind you were about to get in June of 2016 and even 2017. So how do other people feel about the prospect of Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom going their separate ways? People outside Scotland, I will feel robbed when that happens. But I don't think I can, in all conscience, campaign against it. Not now. 0345 6060 973. Will Brexit break up Britain? Come at it from any angle you want. I want the what and the why, of course I do. Will Brexit break up Britain? I think it will. And I don't want it to. Tell me your thoughts. But I also want to know how you feel about what you think the future will hold. Linda is in Axbridge in Somerset. Linda, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'm a Scot. We have a base in Scotland, but we are currently living in Somerset due to my partner's work. And I voted for independence in 2014, and it wasn't a once-in-a-generational vote. It was a case of unless circumstances change. And, of course, circumstances changed very dramatically on the 23rd of June because we were told, and there's an awful lot of people in Scotland who are very pro-EU, who believe that we would believe in the EU if we voted for independence. The truth is that Scotland has been on a different trajectory to the rest of the UK for quite a number of years.
How many years?
I would say probably a good 10, 12, 15 maybe. The advent of devolution and the Scottish Parliament and the differences in the way that we spend the pocket money budget that we are sent every year has seen huge changes to people's real lives. And it's things that the rest of the UK do get a little bit upset about,
Yes.
Free prescriptions, free tuition, etc. But we choose to spend our money in that way rather than on other things. Obviously, we're still contributing additional amounts from the income that Scotland generates to things like defence, etc. And in 2014, if near federalism had been on the table, then I think probably I would have voted for that. In terms of really just we contribute federally to foreign. The Foreign Office and defence, and everything else stays where it is. But of course, Westminster absolutely don't want to lose Scotland because it is a cash cow. And,
is it?
But we're on it. Yes.
Is it? I appreciate you're probably digging deeper into this than I am, but Scotland pays in more to the UK Treasury than it takes out?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Now, yes, absolutely. The figures that are bandied around from a report that's done every year called GERS, GERS, the GERS was set up, and Ian Lang, former Secretary of State, was quoted as saying, if we do it this way, I'm paraphrasing here, if we do it this way, they'll never know how much they contribute. But in general, we do absolutely, and have done for decades, particularly.
Okay, I've got no reason to doubt you, but I just need to establish my own ignorance on this. So if it turns out that you've got it wrong, then I shall be forced to correct it.
Yeah, there are lots and lots of viewpoints on this.
But that's what I thought.
There's a chap called Professor Richard Murphy who's really dug down into it, and he's got some really good reports that you can Google and find.
I will. Just briefly. If Brexit hadn't happened, if the vote hadn't gone the way that it went, and I withdraw my suggestion, Am Incorrigible's unhappy with me, and I don't like that. I withdraw my suggestion that a no-deal Brexit is now close to inevitable. I just think unless there's some significant change at the top of the Labour Party, it is close to inevitable. But if the vote had gone the other way, do you think that the Scottish referendum question, the Scottish independence referendum, would have been a once-in-a-generation question?
I don't think we would be at this point so soon. It's only 5 years since the independence.
Yeah, because you can't know what would happen 20 years down the line, but we wouldn't now. I sit here, I do this every day. I've only relatively recently realised how remiss I've been in dealing with non-English issues over the years. Brexit, I think, is partly explained by the failure of London media to properly reflect feelings in Scotland and Northern Ireland, because they, of course, went the other way.
Well, no, Northern Ireland voted to remain as well.
That's what I mean. Scotland and Northern Ireland went the other way from this country. London oddly remained, and yet we report as if the views of Londoners, Scottish people and Northern Irish people are somehow irrelevant. But what I find astonishing today is I can't see it not happening. I can't see circumstance unless they call Brexit off, and then you've got this groundswell of resentment and historical sense of grievance.
I'm superstitious, and I don't want to believe it until a vote actually happens. But the way that Westminster and the negotiating team for Brexit have ignored Scotland as a nation, and the other thing I'd like to say is it's utterly normal for a nation to want to look after its own affairs. Now, we're very aware after 2014, because it was a huge democratic exercise in 2014 where everybody got involved, and we're very well aware that only 13% of our laws were ever made in Brussels, and quite a lot of them were proposed by Britain and seen through the processes in the European Parliament and the European Union and the Commission by Britain. So as far as Scotland's concerned, 13% by the EU means that in independence we'd get 87% back, whereas at the moment we've only got about 20%.
I hear you. There is room for wriggle on the fiscal question. In 2016, for example, Scotland got more money from the UK government than it sent back, but that is not always the case. So we can just chalk that one up as nuanced. It's not 100% either way, and it's not really relevant to the question that I'm asking. It's astonishing because and I know that this annoys some people, but I have to keep saying it because it's true. And as soon as you stop saying things that are true, all bets are off. There's still no tangible benefit. So now we're being told we have to do this even if it involves the breakup of the United Kingdom because Brexit's so blooming brilliant. And you go, tell me something blooming brilliant about it. I've been doing it for 3 years. Go on, give me the brilliant thing that's going to happen. Go on. So losing Scotland is a price worth paying. Jeremy Hunt says businesses will go bankrupt, but I will oversee it with a heavy heart because it's a price worth paying. And no one can actually say for what. It's quite incredible. And you'd have thought by now people like me would have been a little bit embarrassed. There would have been something that just gets held up as, yeah, well, there you go. Now you can see. This is the juice. This is the jackpot. This is the payoff. Was it the other day the fellow who used to be an MP for Peterborough tweeted me directly saying another humiliation for Remainers. Stuart Jackson, his name is. Another humiliation for Remainers like at Mr. James O.B. And I thought, well, I'm a Catholic. I quite like being humiliated. I'll have a look at that article. And in the first paragraph of the article that this clown was tweeting, It said, this story is a rare dose of good news for an industry battered by Brexit uncertainty. And I thought, that's me, as someone who says Brexit is a bad idea, reading an article that talks about an industry being battered by Brexit uncertainty, having a rare dose of good news, is a humiliation for me. And that man used to be an MP. He's now set himself up as a Brexit consultant, whatever the hell that means. It's just crackers. But today we're just talking about Scotland. Give me a ring if you think that a breakup of the United Kingdom is a price worth paying for getting your country back. Oh, and you can see from the way those words actually appear in your brain what an odd position that would be to have found yourself in. Yes, breaking up our country is a price worth paying for getting our country back. Hey? It's a bit sort of emotional, this conversation. If, like me, you've always thought of yourself as essentially British, or, you know, English by birth, British by heart, really. You travel up and down the length of these islands and feel at home in all corners of them. And then you reflect upon the likelihood of a no-deal Brexit and what it would mean for the Union. I have a listener called Antoine, who's just sent me a tweet he posted in June of 2016, June the 24th. So astonishingly prescient, because you were way ahead of me on this, Antoine. Scotland is heading west, Northern Ireland south, Gibraltar north, and London wishes the ground would swallow it up. Union has become an archaic word. So if you voted to get our country back, could you explain to me how you also voted to break it up? 0345 6060 973. And if you want to come at it from a slightly broader perspective, do you think a no-deal Brexit will break up Britain? 0345 6060 973. David is in Cardiff. David, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Well, firstly, I'd like to say I'd be delighted if it led to the breakup of Britain, because I've been a nationalist all my life. So I appreciate that Wales is not the prime candidate, but it led to Scotland and the North of Ireland leaving. That would be good for me. But I voted to remain in the European Union. I'm very much in favour of the European Union, as I think most nationalists are.
But this is such a difficult word, isn't it, nationalist? Because you get the little fascists and the backturners in the European Parliament using the word nationalist to describe the very opposite of what you seem to mean by it.
To me, it means that you want nations to exist and govern themselves and interact with each other as nations.
So you understand what the European Union is, because Eurosceptics who use the word nationalism think that European Union members somehow don't govern themselves, while not being able to explain why even Scotland and England have different laws regarding, for example, prescriptions, tuition fees, and in the case of Northern Ireland, abortion. So you know both what the word nationalism really means and how the European Union really works, which puts you at complete contrast with Brexit Party type people who use the word nationalist, because they don't know what the word means and they don't know how the European Union really works.
Exactly. I don't think they are nationalists. I see the European Union as a democratic institution comprised of 28 sovereign states. Now, I would like that to comprise of nations, which would be Wales as an independent member, Scotland. So
what would be the difference? I mean, I don't want to get bogged down in the nitty-gritty of Welsh nationalism. I know what devolution means. I know Scotland has gone further down that path than Wales. I also know, of course, as you do, that Wales voted to leave the European Union. But just to step back for a moment, do you think that a no-deal Brexit would... Because I don't think it's going to provide much of a fillip to Welsh nationalist ambitions in the short term, but it could break up Britain relatively quickly, certainly if it gets put back to the people, and the impact of no-deal Brexit is a tenth of the worst-case scenario analyses. Do you think Brexit is maybe even bound to break up Britain?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, why have you rung me up then, you cheeky beggar? I mean, what do you think this is? A contemplative forum for people to admit that they haven't got pungent enough opinions to pick a binary side? Honestly, mate, have you not kept up with the zeitgeist?
Well, I'm against, put it this way, I voted against Brexit, I remain against Brexit. And I think that what happened with May is she went immediately for an extreme Brexit. But the point I would like to make, and you said about Wales voting for Brexit, don't forget that in the Brexit referendum, the vote was limited to people who were UK citizens.
Yes.
Now, I happen to have my own daughter and a stepdaughter. My stepdaughter was not a UK citizen, but she was an EU citizen.
Right.
She was 21 at the time of the referendum. She'd lived in Cardiff for over 10 years, since primary school.
Yes.
And she was not allowed to vote. Now, Wales is her home. She wasn't allowed to vote. That is not democratic at all. It's racist, in my opinion. Now, I know you like facts, and I've got in front of me, I know it's Wikipedia, but the Scottish Independence Referendum Franchise Act.
Yes.
And that said the people eligible for vote were those holding an appropriate citizenship, Commonwealth, Irish, or EU member state. So what they did
if they lived in Scotland.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's what it should be. If you live in the UK, because this was about the UK leaving the EU, then it should be people who are legally living in the UK. Just like people legally living in Scotland.
Otherwise it introduces a form of government endorsed nativism, doesn't it? Which of course is what people who don't know what the word nationalism means really mean. When they use the word nationalism, they mean nativism.
Exactly. That's what I would say is the difference between
I would as well.
nationalism
Thanks for that.
and racism.
Write this down, Keith. We're going to come back to this.
As far as I'm concerned,
yeah,
people living in Wales, if it's their home, fine. Whether it's their home or not, I've got nothing against them. But what we should be talking about is if you live in a country, and I'm not talking about people here on holiday.
You could put a time limit on it. You could say if you've lived and worked here, or you could. I'm not massively keen on saying if you've paid taxes here necessarily, because you might have won the lottery and not worked since. But I agree with you. It is odd that these things got overlooked. I think a lot of the explanations for things that strike us now as being very anomalous or odd, and that we weren't properly aware of them when we needed to be, is because almost all of the media in this country, certainly almost all of the print media, was so slavishly shilling for Brexit, and they, of course, have had to change their tune, just like all the other campaigners have. There's not a newspaper editor on the planet who claimed that we want our country back involved breaking our country up. But rather than admit a mistake or do the decent thing and be consistent and honest and true, they're just rewriting history and pretending. I don't know why. I've spent less time in Wales than Scotland, so I don't quite have the same sense of fellow feeling, but I spend more time chatting to people like David, and I feel just as sad about the prospect of waving bye-bye to Wales as I do about the prospect of waving bye-bye to Scotland. So is it inevitable? If there's a no-deal Brexit, do we break up Britain? And if you voted to get your country back, could you just run me through exactly how what you were really doing was voting to break our country up? 0345 6060 973. David's in Glasgow. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning. I wanted to point out that immediately after the EU vote back in 2016, the SNP were calling for a referendum back then. I mean, this is actually something that's not particularly new.
Yes. Well, it's their raison d'etre. I think we all forget that sometimes south of the border. The SNP might be the party of government in Holyrood, but it exists to pursue Scottish independence.
Of course, yes. I mean, I don't understand that. But at the same time, we only had a vote in 2014. In the 2017 general election, actually, the SNP were pushing this pretty hard, and they lost about 30% of their seats on it.
Yes, but I don't know if you missed a little bit of the introduction. This entire question is contingent upon a no-deal Brexit happening, which changes everything. Yeah, I mean, I do understand that, but again, I'm confused by this because only about 9% of Scottish businesses actually export to the EU. So we have to think really carefully. I need to clarify that for you, because this is a figure that I've heard been doing the rounds with a lot of anti-EU people. It doesn't matter what percentage of businesses export to the EU. You need to look at what percentage of exports go to the EU. So it's a relatively small number of companies doing the massive majority of business. So 9% of companies export to the EU. What percentage of exports go to the EU?
Well, the figure I was actually quoting to you, the fine detail on it, I don't actually have.
Yeah, but think about how important this fine detail is, David, because someone sold you a pup here, mate. 9%. What if there's only one business You see, 9% of businesses export to the EU, but in the context of the UK, it's about 80% of exports, or between 60, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's well over 50%. So that 9% figure is not only meaningless, it's dangerously ignorant.
No. I mean, I do understand all that. I mean, I'm not coming...
So then tell me what percentage of exports go to the EU from Scotland, including, of course, at the moment, England.
Sorry, I missed the question. Say that again.
What percentage of Scottish exports go to the EU?
Well, all I have here is a
that's
figure,
why they've only given you, because wherever you've got that figure from, it is designed to mislead you in the way that it has, you see.
It was the BBC.
Yes, because the businesses, 9% of businesses, you need to know what percentage of exports. Yes. Well, let's do it. Let's Google it now. Yeah?
Yeah, I've not got a computer, mate. I'm really sorry.
It's all right, I'll do it. What percentage of Scottish exports go to the EU? Exports to the rest of the UK accounted for 60% of this overall total, so already we've blown 9% out of the water. £5.5 billion worth of exports from Scotland go to America, so that won't change necessarily. Export destination, of which EU. So in 2017, £32.4 billion worth of exports internationally, of which 14.9 billion went to EU countries. 81 crikey, if you include the UK, you're looking at 48.9 billion.
Okay.
So 9% is utterly meaningless. Do you see why?
Of course, yes.
Yes. So why did you mention it?
Because that was the figure that I had from the BBC.
And that is why it is so important to dig deeper into these statistics. Because the UK exports to the EU is a similarly small number, and you hear them saying it, only X% of UK businesses actually export to the EU. Because most businesses, you know, a sandwich shop, whereabouts in Glasgow are you at the moment? It says a sandwich shop on the high street is a business. That doesn't export to the EU. But what's the bigger employer, the car industry or the sandwich shop industry? These are the things that are beginning to frustrate me now, because people should be pointing this stuff out and they're not, and decent people like David end up on national radio talking twaddle. Do you know, we haven't even said the G word, because if they're now telling you that when you voted to get your country back you voted to break it up, how long before Gibraltar appears in the reckoning? Gibraltar, of course, voted to remain to a tune of about 96%, I think, possibly higher. And of course, I think there's 20,000 itinerant workers crossing that border every single day. You think Ireland is a problem? We haven't even mentioned Gibraltar. Why? And this is just my theory, but because I work in this industry, and obviously it's an industry that is very Brexit heavy, not just here, but newspapers especially. Why would they be writing about Gibraltar? Because they would be writing really, really bad news. And at the moment, they're still shilling for the notion that if you believe in Brexit, then somehow you can rewrite the rules of reality. And speaking of reality, I'll do this more on air if you want me to, but you have to indulge me slightly and give me room to make mistakes or get things wrong. So your man in Glasgow there saying 9% of Scottish businesses export to the EU. There's £81.4 billion a year, 2017 being the last available statistics of exports from Scotland, of which £48.9 billion went to the rest of the UK, so that's within the EU, and £14.9 billion went to other EU countries. So you're looking at, what would that be, £64.3 billion out of a total of £81.4, and then £17.6 billion went to the rest of the world. So with the UK as an EU country, 78% of Scottish exports went to EU countries. 78%. Even if you want to leave the UK out of it, he was out by a factor of 100% when he said only 9% of Scottish companies export to the EU. 18% of all Scottish exports go to European Union countries other than the United Kingdom. So that's why these numbers are so dangerous, and I still don't really understand why they're not being pulled apart like this on a daily basis. I like doing it on air, but I've got quite fat fingers, and I'm not the most technologically literate person on the planet, so I'll try and dig it out in double quick time, doing like live fact checks. But if I make mistakes, be gentle with me, all right? Just point them out and then I can correct them on air. But there is the figure. Even if your man meant just non-UK exports from Scotland, then he's out by a factor of 100%, because it's 18% of these exports. That's £14.9 billion, boom. But if you include all European Union countries, including the United Kingdom, then it's a cool 78% of all Scottish exports that make their way to other parts of the European Union. Alan is in Glasgow. Will Brexit break Britain, Alan?
Hi, James. Good morning.
Hello.
I'm absolutely certain that a no-deal Brexit is a huge boost to the possibility of Scottish independence and maybe even the reunification of Ireland. I heard your speaker earlier on in the programme, the chap from Wales, the Welsh nationalist. He seems to be of the opinion that maybe if Scotland gains independence due to the Brexit fiasco, that Wales may take a lead from that. Many people in Wales may then start to wake up to the idea that Brexit is such a bad decision that...
they voted for it, of course, whereas the people of Scotland didn't.
We didn't. Exactly.
But what I'm into, I'm most interested on the programme in people who changed their mind. We have a little motto on the show that there's no point having a mind if you never changed it. And what we can't do is scientifically measure. I'm sure there have been opinion polls, but we're speculating about a no-deal Brexit. If a no-deal Brexit is a quarter as bad as most of the expert analysis tells us it will be, I presume that the number of people who voted to remain in the Union will change their minds.
I've got no doubt about that. I've got quite a few friends, and I've got a lot of friends in Scotland, many of whom, not a huge number, but many of whom were unionists at the last independence referendum, and they voted to remain in the UK under the main threat, by the way, that we were persuaded in Scotland that if we were to vote for independence, we would be out of the EU. It was one of the major threats put to us by the Better Together campaign. So that swayed, not just that, but that swayed many people. And then, lo and behold, we voted to remain in the Union, and we find ourselves getting dragged out of the EU against the wishes of the Scottish electorate, which voted 62 to 38%. to remain in the EU.
And that's probably moved up as well subsequently.
Sure it has.
Can you reassure
sure
me? I'm going to be a bit selfish now. It's not very professional of me.
Go ahead, James.
Well, I'm worried about a hard border in Ireland because of the Good Friday Agreement. You don't have the same treaty requirements between Scotland and England, but I think in the context of what I understand about regulatory alignment and rules, it would be very hard if Scotland wanted somehow post-independence to rejoin the European Union while England remained in the on the outside. I can't quite see how you can do that without having a border across the middle of our country.
That is the major threat and the major problem of a no-deal Brexit.
And why are we doing it then? What are these people who wanted their country? What are they getting in return for all this mess? I'm asking everyone. I'm asking everyone.
The whole thing to me is like a bad dream.
Yeah.
And one day we'll wake up, we'll realise just how bad it has been. Hopefully we will anyway. Now, in Scotland, many people in Scotland believe, and I don't mean to sound selfish here because I've got friends and relatives throughout the UK who I love dearly. And by the way, if ever we get independence, you are still more than welcome to come and visit us. You say you feel comfortable in Scotland. You will feel comcomfortable in
I'm sure I will. I feel confident in Greece as well, but I wouldn't have quite the same freedoms, would I? I wouldn't be in my home country. My passport says, Great Britain on it.
Well, I know it does. Well, I have a UK passport, and I've recently applied and been granted an Irish passport because I am so desperate to remain a citizen of the EU that I managed to use my parentage to grant myself or to qualify.
A lot of people are. Their numbers have gone absolutely through the roof.
Exactly.
Of course, a lot of very, very wealthy supporters of Brexit have taken similar steps with regard to Maltese passports or getting German passports for their children because, I guess,
ironically, that is the case. So, I mean, how can we possibly have swallowed these people telling us that being in the EU was undemocratic and it wasn't good and we were taking back control, while at the very same time, some of them, like Brian Monteith, the recently elected MEP, he actually lives in France.
Does he?
And he claimed that he does. He lives in France, and he claimed that.
So did Lord Lawson, the chairman of the Vote Leave campaign, mate.
Exactly.
It's too late. These ships have sailed, haven't they? And also, you and I sitting here thinking logic matters and all these things are important. There's a significant swathe of the country that absolutely doesn't.
No, and another thing I'd like to quickly mention is when David from Wales was on, he was talking about an EU relative of his who was debarred from voting in the EU referendum.
His niece, his stepdaughter.
In the Scottish independence referendum, our franchise was very widely...
He made that point. He made that point, Alan. He made that point, and he made it very well.
He didn't. I know, but he didn't mention that we also opened a franchise for the independence referendum to 16 and 17-year-olds.
He didn't. You're right, but you have now.
And 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland are also allowed to vote in Holyrood elections. And they're also allowed to vote in local
But hang on a
elections.
minute. You must be making this up, because Brussels makes all our laws. You can't have different voting ages in two parts of the United Kingdom. Brussels controls our laws, Alan. Haven't you been paying attention?
It's impossible to have different abortion laws across the UK because everything is run from Brussels.
Exactly. Oh, Northern Ireland has got different abortion laws to the rest of the UK. Alan's being cheeky. I know, I'm being cheeky about you being cheeky. This is going to make heads explode. Who's actually being facetious and who's being... No, we're all good. Mate, I'm going to crack on, Alan, because I sense, and I hope you'll take this as a compliment, because I fit in this category very much myself, that if I don't interrupt you, you may never stop talking. 11:49 is the time. Mystery Hour starts at 12. I'm going to do an early Mystery Hour question for you. Okay? The qualification is quite easy to establish. What's going to happen with Gibraltar if there's a no-deal Brexit? 0345 6060 973. The Holy Grail of callers today are, like the Holy Grail, remaining quite elusive. People who will actually, with a straight face and a straight bat, will actually state that when they voted to get their country back, they knew they were voting to break it up, and that's fine. They're cool with that. I don't mind about I voted to get my country back. So we know that that's a meaningless slogan, but we also know that a lot of people still salute it. Are you prepared to explain how getting your country back always inevitably involved breaking your country in half? 0345 6060 973. And a couple of my Scottish listeners have already pointed out that I'm part of the problem, that they've done it in a nice, polite way. I think, say losing Scotland. I don't want to lose Scotland as if it somehow belongs to me. But actually, I would defend myself on that. As a Brit, I don't want to lose the Scottish part of my identity. I am British. I am European. Both of those unions are now under threat. But if you can explain what you think will happen in Gibraltar, I will give you the money myself, as Les Dennis famously promised. John's in air. John, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
I think I'm going to agree mostly with your Scottish callers.
No one really is making a case for saying the union will be fine in the event of a no-deal Brexit. And to be fair, I don't think Theresa May believes it either. Otherwise, she wouldn't be standing up in Scotland today saying, be careful, be careful, be careful. Yes,
I totally agree. I mean, I think Theresa May, if anything, has been a great recruitment for Scottish independence, as is the Tory party. And I think Brexit, I mean, all it's done is hasten the breakup of the UK, because I actually think it was inevitable after 2014, James.
Did you?
Yes, I mean...
I didn't, and obviously you're more invested in this than I am, but I genuinely thought it might have been put to bed for a generation.
Well, you know, James, in 2014, following all the promises of, you know, the greatest devolution in the world, and
Devo Max,
all the rest of it, and the very fact that we're absolutely told and threatened almost that if we voted yes, we would be out of the EU. Many people took them for their word and thought, okay, we'll stay as UK, it'll be stable, but the UK that we voted for in 2014 is absolutely not the UK we have now in 2019. And what we were promised, and you know, this stable democracy of the UK and everything else, it's just not a reality anymore. And I know for one thing, I mean, I was always for Scottish independence, and there was nothing against England or anything like that. I just believe...
The polling didn't support your optimism, did it?
100% of the time, and I think that's a premise of democracy, and we don't. In 64 years, we have never voted for a Tory government, but we're absolutely governed by these people, and as regardless of what they say about the Tory resurgence in Scotland, Scotland, really, they got 11% of the last vote.
And when I describe other parts of the United Kingdom that will never have returned a majority for the Tories as well, you quite rightly respond by saying you're ignoring our nationhood, James. It's all very well talking about the coalfields of Yorkshire or Nottinghamshire or the steel country of Wales. They've never returned a Tory majority either, but you would quite rightly say you're ignoring our nationhood, and it is the ignoring of the nationhood that lies at the heart of this cause.
Yes, because Yorkshire is, part of England, and if England as a country decides it wants a Tory government, unfortunately for the people in, say, Yorkshire, they have to go with their country is voted for. But I find it very galling that
I bet you
country...
I bet you do.
Suddenly, and Theresa May coming up here, and it's almost like a school teacher coming up to lecture us again and to warn us of what will happen.
Do you understand where I'm coming from, or not?
I actually feel sorry for a lot of people in England. And I think it's a strange thing, because I believe that Scotland's never lost its identity in the 300 years we have had a union, but England appears to kind of struggle between, say, Britishness and Englishness, if that's even a word. I just believe that we...
Well, I don't know that I agree. I find it perfectly easy to sort of take pride in Shakespeare and Dickens and Hubert Parry's setting of William Blake's Jerusalem and all of that stuff.
Yes, as you should.
But equally, I like my Robert Louis Stevenson and my pride in the 19th century Enlightenment philosophers who hailed mostly from Scotland, your J.S. Mills and the like. I feel ever so slightly less invested in them, but I'm still invested in them. So if it was like a pie chart, it would be like 40% English, 30% Scottish, 30%... in my case, Irish or a little bit of Welsh and stuff. But it's all me, and all of it European. It's such an odd thing to be getting hung up on after all these years of war. But I understand the Scottish position in a way that I didn't before.
James, I can remember... I was actually, a couple of years ago, I was going to phone you because I felt... And it's the same as during the Scottish independence referendum, there was the Commonwealth Games, and I ran a gym at the time. And a correspondent from a London-based paper was up covering it. And when I had mentioned about Scottish independence, it was absolutely, don't be silly, that could never happen, you're never going to do it. And I felt yourself as a little... I agree in a lot of things you said, but
I
thought, James, get a wee bit of knowledge in Scotland here.
You were absolutely right. Thank goodness you didn't need to ring me. I've done it anyway. But it is clear to me, and it is things like concepts of nationhood. But more importantly, as you say, I can sit here and frame a position where I'm supportive of Theresa May's interventions today because I want the union to be sustained. Yes. But when you tell me she's like a schoolmistress who's completely ignored you for the whole term, and only after announcing her retirement, she's waltzing up there and pretending to care about you. That's how I feel.
Injury to insult. We have Mr. Hunt saying, for example, he's going to, after the Scottish government's been told you have no place in the Brexit negotiations, he's now saying Ruth Davidson, who, let's not forget, got 11% of the vote in her last election, who's lost every single election she's ever had in Scotland, is being advocated now to speak for Scotland in the Brexit negotiations. It's been clearly...
What's that got to do with democracy or accountability or transparency? I'm with you. I bet he'd give me a break. Better late than never. Nobody, I don't think, is making a case or seeking to challenge the notion that a no-deal Brexit will break up Britain. So we are now, and every time I think we've got as surreal as it's possible to get, we get more surreal. We are now seeing people who claimed that they wanted to get their country back, poised. I don't think anyone's actually claimed it yet publicly, but that you're about to claim that getting your country back meant breaking your country up all along. This is how groomed a significant swathe of our population has been. I'm going to give you that Orwell line again. The party told them to ignore the evidence of their own eyes and ears. It was their final, most important command. What did you vote for? To get my country back. What does that mean? Breaking it in half. How have you allowed them to do this to you? And Gibraltar. I actually want answers to Gibraltar now. I wasn't going to put it in Mystery Hour. I was going to do like an early aperitif of Mystery Hour. Phil in Gibraltar, who has called us a couple of times, he paints a very, very bleak picture of what he thinks will happen there and says he doesn't want to explain it in full because he might start crying at work again, which I presume is a slight embellishment, but the 20,000 workers that cross that border every day become an immediate problem. How is that going to be policed? How is that going to change? What happens in Gibraltar if we leave the European Union with no Brexit? How far away are we from people claiming that they voted to get their country back because they wanted to wave goodbye to Scotland and Gibraltar and Northern Ireland all along? Keith's in Ballantrae. Keith, what would you like to say?
Hi, buddy. Keep up the good work.
When you say good work, it's a ridiculous way to earn a living.
This keep bringing it to the public, haven't you?
Well, these are the deals and the facts, but how much longer are people going to care about facts?
I don't know. But
will Brexit break Britain?
The point I wanted to make was I was an ardent unionist living in Kent. I had been living in England since 1977.
Right.
Last December, last year, I moved back to Scotland because, quite frankly, I was sick of it all. I was sick of the little Englander, the little stomping about, talking about the Blitz, hiding under tables, and I went through the war and all that. I was sick of it.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, back then, I mean, I've fallen out with my father a few times about the argument about independence of Scotland, and he's still in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
But back then, I always thought it was about claymore swinging. It was all about, we're an independent nation.
William Wallace
that was what I thought, well, no, we're stronger together. Similarly, I think we're stronger together in Europe.
Yes.
But it's almost as if they can't encompass this idea that, we had a British Empire, for God's sake. We were forcing our rule on a British Empire. But suddenly it's not good to be in an empire.
But these clowns who turn their backsides to the orchestra in Strasbourg earlier in the week, claiming that it's because they've had an anthem imposed on them or a flag imposed on. I tell you what, Keith, when they find out what the British Empire was all about, they're going to lose it big time.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point, isn't it? But there's no reality anymore. And you kind of summed it up a couple of calls ago when you said that you're a technophobe and you're not into technology and all that. What in God's name is a government doing asking us, the public, to solve a political, economical problem like Brexit?
I know. I'm not a technophobe, but I could do a better job of explaining Brexit than Theresa May managed to do in her premiership. And last word on this too, Phil in Gibraltar. The border will become chaotic as we try to get 20,000 itinerant workers in and out each day without a proper treaty on movement of labour. Planes won't be able to land as they can't use EU airspace. We will surely get something in place. But this is what will happen on November the 1st if this isn't established immediately. And supermarkets will run out of stock, restaurants will run out of food. Not because the food isn't there, but because it gets checked, potentially. So Gibraltar, Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe Wales. You'll be left with an England that is, 30% of the United Kingdom's tax take currently comes from London. I don't know what that would be if you removed Scotland and Northern Ireland from that figure, but you're going to be left with a heavily Remain supporting London being simultaneously insulted and relied upon by the rest of England. And that's probably a recipe for more division. People like me could end up becoming separatists. We should build a wall around the M25 and keep our money, keep control of our money, our borders and our laws. And all these people that have voted for some Second World War revivalism wet dream, they can just keep each other's company. It's nuts, and that's the question. That's today's conclusion, right? Who voted to get their country back and has woken up today claiming that they voted to break their country up? Answer, currently nobody. But once the snake oil seeps into your system, once the demagogues and the liars and the racists are back on your televisions and your radios wanging on about complete nonsense, once your people who have created this mess continue to try to blame it on anybody else, are you going to let them do it to you again? Are you going to be that person that voted to get your country back, but is now imminently set to claim that actually you voted to break your country up all along?